when you're watching things and reading things, or maybe not even watching them and somehow they get in your head anyway, all these things sort of like form these like links. Like the brain is a great pattern finder, and you know, it makes links, it forms patterns, and everything that's in there and that you're consuming is kind of just working together to find something cohesive that works. Kind of like when you look at something nondescript and you see a face, because like your mind is programmed to look for these certain images. And I think it works, that your imagination works that way with stories, and the more you put in there, the more likely you've got a bigger well to draw upon, that that you're more likely to have a new idea like bubble to the surface one day.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. That we need to be totally stoking our fires on a regular basis. One thing I wanted to point out here, just because we do live in a huge information age, but at the same time, you can develop the same idea that someone else developed. That happens. It happens a lot. The telephone was designed and the television was also designed in two different places roughly at the same time. The reason is sometimes we come up with these same ideas is because it's in the conscious subculture that it's just there, like because this idea and this idea and this idea are being shared out in public, it's easy to come to the same conclusions. And that's because we're all humans, we all have the same brain pattern. We all have the ability to tell story, and sometimes this can happen, and that's okay. You don't have to defend yourself for coming up with the same story that someone else came up with.
I think it was possibly Jim Rohn who said, "There's nothing quite as powerful as an idea whose time has come," and that's interesting. And I think like with the telephone and the television, it's almost like that idea's time had come. And so it was inevitable that it was going to perhaps pop up in a few different places.
Yeah.
And at least it means like, you're paying attention to the right ideas.
Well, yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, in this world where we've broken down the walls of publishing, we've broken down we've torn down the gatekeepers. It's still, now it comes down to who can present the idea better, and who can get that idea out in front of an audience faster and be able to tell that story with the power that it needs to be told. Just because people have the same idea, one person is going to be able to do it better than someone else. Last night, we were talking about critique groups and beta readers and trying to, how to use them. And one person was like, well, what happens if someone steals your idea? Okay, well, if they steal your idea and they make it successful, it just means that you're not at that level to make it successful yet. It's just really at that point is who can make it successful. And because telling the story is not just about the idea. And I mean, we're going to talk about, that's what we're talking about here, is generating that idea, but it's also generating it and putting it into a context that it becomes a good idea that catches fire.
Yeah. So how do we check that context? How do we kind of like, run our idea up against something and figure out, if it's the right one?
Sure. There's certainly some different ways that we could do this. The first one I would talk about is turning back. If you watched our series on the 7 basic plots, this is kind of the same idea. I have this book by Ronald Tobias. It's called 20 Master Plots. And he goes through and talks about...
That's a cool name. I'll read that just for the name.
Yeah, I know. And Ronald B. Tobias. Sounds pretty awesome. So, like, he goes in and talks about plots, like the quest, the adventure, pursuit, rescue, escape, revenge, riddle, rivalries, underdogs, temptation, metamorphosis, transformation, love, forbidden love, sacrifice, discovery, wretched excess, and ascensions and descensions. So there's a lot of plots available out there. So let's take a look at your idea. Maybe we should talk just a little bit more first about generating the idea, and then we'll jump onto this. So how do you generate this idea? Peter's already mentioned, is definitely filling up that well. I would say also, jump in and take a look at what's going on in the popular media today. Like, take a look at the news headlines. Those have stories that already have set up conflict and heroes and villains and things that you can draw from immediately. So let's say you grab the story headline, and we'll use a dark headline first. Unfortunately, we've had a lot of school shootings that have happened in the past several years, and it's just a real devastating idea. But it's part of our culture now. Like, this idea of terrorism has become part of our everyday life over the past decade. And so let's say that you're wanting to write a story that takes place during a school shooting with people inside that little room, like they barricaded themselves in, and the tension and things that are involved in that. So you would take that story idea, and then you would look at it against the plots. What kind of a story is this? And you could look through these and say, let me pull this back up again, and is it the underdog story? Probably not. Is it that metamorphosis? Maybe it's about a person who, comes out of their shell to be the hero in that situation. It could be about sacrifice, and that could be the story. And so you look at it and you say, how does this story fit with other stories that are already in these genres, that are in these plots? Where does my story fit? Because if you can't find that story fit for it, if you can't find where it fits neatly into a plot, it's going to be harder to get that story into the minds of readers. And the reason why plot is important and structure is important is that gives the familiar feeling for the reader to then be exposed to your new ideas.
Thank you for listening, and come back next week for more. Please visit thebookeditorshow.com for show notes, links to guests, books and extras, and for information on how to be a guest on the show.